Welcome to Hunt Valley Church ESL Level 4. This is our first class and our introduction. My name is Chris. I'll be teaching the course with Greg. We've taught this course now for 3 years, although this is our first attempt at teaching it online. We've tried to experiment over the years with different formats to the class, and I think we've agreed that we're going to focus on certain elements this year, one of which is grammar, another is idioms, but we're going to kind of mix in cultural, historical, civics issues that we have dealt with in past years. So basically, each class, which will be 20 or 25 minutes, I think, will first start with idioms, and then we'll have some grammar elements, and we'll start with very basic elements: what's a noun and a pronoun, different verbs, different parts of the sentences, and then we'll talk about sentence structure over time. These are things we hadn't done in past years, but we think will benefit the level of students we have, who we think all have familiarity with English. Many are very adept at English, but just need some refinement work. And as I said, we will deal with current affairs, U.S. history, or civics issues in teaching the grammar elements or the sentence elements, so it's integrated into the written or spoken English that you're going to hear. Lastly, we'll do a Bible verse each time, and we'll attempt to make the Bible verse link to topics we're talking about. So what do we expect from our students? I came up with a acronym, I guess, this year called ROW. It doesn't work perfectly, but every year we start the class by encouraging students to read. And we think, no matter what you're doing, what your job is, reading outside of class, reading English is going to help you. It's going to help you see sentence structure that makes it more familiar to you. It's going to help improve your vocabulary, and it's going to broaden your horizon. So what we expect from students is to row with us, and one is read, and read. Now, we've heard from many students that they don't speak English outside of class. They're only they have a spouse or parents at home, and they revert to their native language. Reading is something you do by yourself, and you should be able to do some every day. Second is, for O, is oral practice. And by that we mean practice speaking English. If you have a job where you're not required to speak, find people to talk to. If you have to call friends outside your home, you've got to practice English outside of class, because having a half-hour lesson from us or a Zoom meeting of an hour a week is not going to improve your English significantly. You've got to do this on a regular basis. Last, we want you to write. In past years, we've given homework assignments, and we've had mixed success with that. Some people do it sometimes, some people never do it, some people would do it all the time. We'll see how it goes. We're not going to start with homework assignments, but if we do, there's going to be an email address attached to this video that you can send your written work to, and we'll look at it, and if it requires responses from us, we'll give you those responses by email. But it's another way of forcing you to look at the grammar elements that we're going to talk about. You're going to have to put pen to paper, I think, to do that. I mean, reading is going to help you most of all, but actually writing, and if you have to if it's writing emails, if it's writing letters, anything you can think of that will give you practice writing. I mean, nowadays most people are confined in their writing to these short texts or messaging people on Facebook or whatever. That's good, but it's not enough. You know, at some point down the line, you're going to have to practice writing something lengthier than a phrase or a sentence, more like a paragraph. So that's what we expect from you. What do we pledge to do in the class is to try and make it interesting. And to the extent this can be interesting by video, we're going to focus on current topical subjects that are currently in the news, to the extent they're non-political, and to the extent they have historical meaning for the United States, because a lot of people need to know U.S. history for citizenship tests, etc. So that's what we'll focus on. To start with tonight I wanted to just give you an example of an idiom. And to the extent any of you have been with us before, we did these pretty regularly. Sometimes we'd pass out, 10 at a class and divide them up and let people figure out, learn for themselves, and kind of research and find out what they mean. What is an idiom? Basically, it's a phrase that you cannot deduce its meaning from the words themselves. They're figurative expressions is probably a neat way or succinct way of putting it. If you've heard the expression, it's raining cats and dogs, obviously it doesn't rain cats and dogs, but it's an expression that over time was used to mean that it was raining heavily. Now, one way to learn about the origins and kind of remember these is to look them up. Do a little research. It's not hard. You can go on Wikipedia online. Everybody's got a phone these days, and see what was the origin of this particular expression. Why study idioms? They are common in our usage. I mean, sometimes when I'm explaining what an idiom is, I will use another idiom to explain it. They permeate our language nowadays, and we don't even realize we're using them. And for people who have another native language, our reaction to this is that they just pass them by. They don't know what they mean, and they just ignore them in their common speech in the world, or they ask later. And one of the common things we get from students is, well, does this have a negative or a positive connotation, or is it just neutral? And that's an important thing to know, because if you start I think using these expressions makes you sound integrated or assimilated into the culture, because a lot of these are just cultural expressions. I'll give you, tonight's is kind of an odd expression, but I still hear it used, is okay. This is an expression that, if anybody knows what Kool-Aid is, I don't even know if it still exists. It was a sugary drink that people made out of a mix long ago. It may still exist, I'm not even sure. But it's an expression that we now take, it has a negative connotation now, to the extent that if you use it with somebody, you're basically saying that they've bought into some false theology or some false belief system or some false science. I'll give you two examples that I made up, and I'm not going to write down. One is, you really drank the Kool-Aid on solar power when you installed solar panels on the roof of your car. Okay, so most people don't have solar panels on their car, and it's the connotation or the meaning of that statement to somebody would be what you're doing is ridiculous. It's stupid. Why would you do that? You've taken solar power to the extreme by installing it on the roof of your car. Another example I've made up of a sentence is, I see you really drank the Kool-Aid on the health benefits of eating beets, since I see you have beet-flavored ice cream in your refrigerator. Okay, most people don't have beet-flavored ice cream in their refrigerator. It's just saying you went down the road too far on something, or you've taken something to an extreme. You're no longer in the mainstream, I guess, of thought. Now, where does this expression come from? Since it doesn't mean drinking literally doesn't mean drinking a sugary flavored, fruit flavored drink. And this is where the negative connotation comes from it. This all dates back to, and it's interesting, I watched a video over the weekend where people were interviewed on the street about the expression. All of the interviewees were familiar with the expression. None of them knew what the origins of it were. And I think that's because the events that gave rise to the expression were back in the late 1970s. And unless you're 50 or older or thereabouts, you don't remember these events. I do. Greg does as well. So the phrase originates from events in Jonestown, Guyana on November 18, 1978, in which 900 members of the People's Temple movement, we would just say it's a cult movement, died. The movement's leader was named Jim Jones, and he called a mass meeting at Jonestown Pavilion after the murder of U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan and others in a nearby port. Jones proposed revolutionary suicide by way of ingesting a powdered drink. The research I did wasn't necessarily Kool-Aid, but that's what it came to be known as, lethally laced with cyanide and other drugs, which had been prepared by his aides. The disturbing part of the history on this was that young children were forced to drink this cyanide drink, and as a result, I think 900 something members died. Some survived, and so to the extent anybody's connected to this or has relatives connected to this, they would be very upset to hear this expression even used. But if you're going to use the expression, just keep in mind it has a disparaging connotation. It's not a positive comment that you're making about somebody if you say you really drank the Kool-Aid on that. So that's the idiom. We're going to do there's going to be multiple idioms each week. You're not confined to the idioms that we address in this class. Feel free to find other idioms of interest or raise them with us through the email. Send them to us if there's something you don't understand. That the question I can recall getting from people is, is this a positive thing to say? Because people, you're now unfamiliar with the context of how this is used, and you want to make sure you're using it appropriately. Okay, enough said about idioms for tonight. I want to start our grammar with what I consider the basic elements of grammar, parts of speech. And tonight, I just want to talk about two, nouns and pronouns, okay? For some of you, this is old hat, and there's an idiom. But if it is, use it as a refresher. Some of this you may have heard, some of it you may not have heard. What is a noun? A noun is, when I learned English as a youngster, a noun was a person, place, or thing. Now you see it defined as person, place, thing, or idea. That's something new, and it's a way of capturing a lot of other things that wind up as nouns. What's a pronoun? I guess the simple definition to remember is it's a substitute or a replacement for a noun. Okay. Now, what are the things we need to know about these two concepts in grammar? One is we have to know singulars and plurals. When we start talking about verbs, the verb has to agree with the noun that's the subject of the sentence, and so the first thing is be familiar with how to make a plural out of a singular noun, how to make a singular out of a plural noun. Most of the time, it's just adding an S to a noun, but as in every other thing about English, there are exceptions. There are irregular plural forms. The plural form of child is children. The plural form of wife is wives. Of wolf is wolves. So you have to get familiar with all the plural forms of nouns. How do you do that? Read. Expand your vocabulary. That's the easiest way. It's not something you just sit down and start learning these things. These are things you pick up by reading. Now, there are also associated with nouns and pronouns what we call, I'm just going to introduce this tonight, and as Greg and I talk further down about sentences and verbs, there are different cases for nouns. Nouns can be in what's called a subjective case. It used to be called nominative, I think. They can be in an objective case. Or a possessive case. Now, this is just a matter of analyzing how it's used in the sentence. If the noun is used as a subject in the sentence, that is the doer of action, it's in the subjective case. If it's used as the object of the action, verb, or the object of a preposition, it's in the objective case. And then there are nouns that are used as possessive, in the possessive case. Doesn't really matter when you're looking at a sentence and there are nouns in it. Because the form of the noun doesn't change based on how it's used in the sentence. It's the same noun, whether it's singular or plural. It does matter here because pronouns change their form depending on how they're used in the sentence. So in the subjective case, a pronoun would be, let's see, let me just write them out. I, you, he, she, it. In the objective case, it would be me, you, it's him, her, and it. And us and them. And we'll talk about this more, but there's the first person singular, I am, second person singular, you are, third person singular, he, she, or it is. And then when you move into the first person plural, it's we are, you are, they are. Okay, this is bad here. In the objective case, it's me is the first person singular, you is the second person singular, him, her, it, third person singular. In the objective case, first person plural is us, and you never changes, and then them is third person plural. Okay, and then there's possessive. A possessive pronoun is, let me just copy here, my or mine, you or yours, his, her, or hers, and it's, our, ours, their, theirs. I'm not going to write all that out. Ours, their, theirs. So you can see, if you're going to use it appropriately in speaking or writing, you're going to have to decide where it's, and this is the hardest thing for a lot of people. And even people who are experienced native English speakers have to think sometimes, is it being used as a subject in the sentence or as an object in the sentence? Because that's what decides which form of the pronoun you're going to use. And obviously you're using pronouns to substitute, because you're not going to say, Mr. Gregg all the time throughout the sentence. If you're using a reference to him, 6 times in a sentence or 3 times in a sentence, you're going to want to mix it up to make it more interesting and use him or his. So keep that in mind. Just to give you an example of some sentences, and this brings in some of our, we're currently in a period where we have a vacancy on the Supreme Court that many of you have heard about over the last week in the news. The president has nominated, he has a right to nominate when there's a vacancy on the court. Justice Ginsburg passed away on September 18, and President Trump nominated a replacement on last Saturday, on the 26th of September, Amy Coney Barrett. Now, I watched her speech after she was nominated, and she said, as part of her speech, she promised to serve all Americans, not just her family and friends. So in this sentence, the pronoun she, which is third person singular, refers to Judge Barrett. Serve all Americans. This is a noun. All is just a descriptor for the noun, and there it's used as in the objective case. She promised to serve all Americans, not just her family and friends. So here's another pronoun. The pronoun here is her, and that's used in the possessive case. So it's referring to Judge Barrett's family and friends. It's a modifier there because it's not talking about any family and friends, her family and friends. Okay. Second example of nouns and pronouns, I guess. And this will be just nouns. The Constitution promises equal justice for all Americans, okay? So the noun here is the Constitution. And that's in the subjective case because it's the subject of the sentence. The Constitution, the document, promises, is the verb there. And another noun here is justice, okay? Equal modifies justice. Justice is a noun, and it's what we talked about when we were defining nouns. It's an idea. Justice is not a person, place, or thing. It's an idea. There's one other noun here, Americans. It's a plural form, and here it's in the objective case because there's a preposition here, for all Americans. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't change the form of Americans because nouns don't change their form depending on where they're used in a sentence. Okay, last sentence. Its terms, its, referring to the Constitution, can be changed by amendments, and there are now 27 of them. So its is in the possessive form pronoun, referring to the Constitution. Its terms is a subject, that's a noun, can be changed by amendments. Amendments is a noun. These are changes to the Constitution over time. But it's in the objective case because there's a preposition here, by, before it. And there are now 27 of them. Okay? It's plural pronoun in the third person because and it's in the objective case because it's a preposition. It's the object of this preposition. So that's just a starter on, and I didn't mean to inundate people with this tonight, but we're going to take apart the pieces of a sentence, and then we're going to put everything together later on. And we're going to refresh and bring your memory on a lot of this stuff as we go along. One thing people can do as an assignment is take any piece of writing, I don't care if it's a magazine article, a newspaper article, anything you can get your hands on, and take a paragraph or two and circle nouns, underline pronouns, kind of distinguish the two, and try and figure out which case they're being used in. Are they in the subjective case, the objective case, or the possessive case? Okay, that's enough grammar for tonight, enough current affairs. The last thing we're going to do is read a Bible verse. I picked Genesis 2:18. Chapter 2, verse 18 to 20, and I'll just read it for you. I'm not going to write it out. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds of the air, and all the beasts of the field. And I thought this was appropriate for dealing with nouns because in Genesis in the Bible, God names certain things himself, man and woman, but he left all the nomenclature, all the naming for man to do, as the verse says. And that's it for tonight's class. So I hope you have an opportunity to view it and spend some time practicing with nouns and pronouns. Thanks.